there, this is Christina Richmond, Principal Analyst with Richmond Advisory Group, and I am sitting here today with John Fokker, who is the Head of Threat Intelligence for Trellix. Hi, John.
Hi, Christina. Happy to be here.
I'm so excited to have this conversation. So today we're going to talk about your threat prediction blog for Trellix, and you got out early, and I love the blog. So one of the things that I've already said to you is that there was so much good stuff in this blog. It wasn't the usual, kind of
Mhm.
yawner predictions that a lot of folks do every year. It was different. It struck a lot of different chords. So there was so much to talk about that it's hard to figure out how can we spend our 10 minutes. So my favorites, which thank you very much for allowing me to put those forward, were AI security, the
Mhm.
NFT challenges that you talk about, and then ransomware. So shall we just jump in?
Let's dive in. Let's get started.
Okay. Everyone is talking about AI security, right? All the benefits we're seeing for the business. Some are talking about privacy, some are talking about data exfiltration and cybersecurity issues.
Mhm.
But we are a racehorse, right, with AI right now. Certain announcements have come out just recently telling us that there's even more benefit to the business. And there are discussions about protection. So we could spend hours and hours on this alone, but I want to talk about the vulnerabilities you're seeing with AI. And then how does that affect businesses? How does that affect the individuals? And what can they do to protect themselves as best as we possibly can?
Yeah, that's a great point. I can't help to remember like last year when OpenAI came out with ChatGPT,
Yeah.
and it was around this time, I believe. It was maybe a little bit earlier, but I was sitting there and I was like, "Hey, this is pretty cool." It's like, "Oh well." And one of the first things we did as researchers, like, "Oh, can I craft a phishing mail? Can it write like hunting rules? Can I make malware with it?" So we were all playing with it. Sure enough, it's not only us, but it's also threat actors. So threat actors are also very keen to use it and to use it maliciously. So we like to say the era or the age of the phishing emails riddled with spelling errors and incorrect sentences, that's over.
That's over.
If you're a self-respected cyber criminal, you can craft a really, really good phishing email.
That's right. The thing that really scares me though, John, yeah, phishing, no spelling errors, looks real. That is a concern. The thing that really terrifies me in looking at this is vishing, the voice
Mhm.
impersonation, and the deep fake stuff that I'm seeing.
Yeah.
That means your banker can call you and say, "Hi, this is so and so from XYZ Bank," and it sounds like them. They may have sent you an email ahead of it. So, what do we
Mhm.
do? What do we do
Yeah,
ahead of that?
that's that's almost like Mission Impossible, right? Where they put Tom Cruise and they take the mask off.
That's right.
Yeah, it's that's scary stuff.
It is.
I'm used to having robocalls and all kinds of things, and if it now sounds more legit, it only makes it more real for a lot of people. But at the same time, probably what we'll see is the age-old, very simple question. So you have a predetermined question with a predetermined answer, and the threat actor might not know the answer to that question. So those are like simple things that we could see. And it scares me too, but
Hmm.
this is what's evolution, right? It's coming our way, and we have to find ways to tackle this. We will see the technology, even in the Trellix stack that we have, when we look at the emails and some of the other things that they do, where they put snippets in from voice recordings. Our researchers are always looking at like, how can we detect this? One of the things that I saw when I talk about like ChatGPT and the things that are worrisome to me is not Chat, but with phishing, that is in the past we've had something that was really tricky to tackle was email thread hijacking. That's what it's called, the technique.
Yep.
This was a technique developed and was not developed, but very much used by Emotet and TrickBot. When they infected a victim, they went automatically to where their email box was. They downloaded all these emails, and they would identify active email threads. So Christina, you and I are talking about a certain project together. And it could be within a company, it could be outside of a company as well, that you're working with a supplier. And what they would do, they would hijack the thread. So they would impersonate John and they would send a new email to Christina asking her whatever, and then asking her to open up a link or some attachment. What that requires you is, as an attacker, is to study the behavior, study the language, and study
Yep.
the different tones and the subjects. Well, guess what? You can copy all that into an LLM and you can just say, give me a response with the tone of voice of John to Christina, asking her to look at these numbers or whatever.
Yeah.
It will take you 5 seconds and you have it. And you have a foolproof one. And I'll guarantee you, people will click on it. Much easier.
Yeah, no, 100%. And there have been some interesting studies about, I forget what they're called, but injection into like a chat on a browser, for example, and how,
Hmm.
you can use AI to inject into that chat bot and take over that conversation. And because you're in a trusted browser with a trusted vendor, for example, the next thing you know, you're saying, I want to buy this. Here's my credit card and here's my name and my email. And you have no idea that it is
Yeah.
AI behind it. So that is the fear, uncertainty, and doubt. That's the FUD information. And everybody knows this. And we're concerned. And you see it every day at Trellix. And I know your threat researchers are keeping on top of all of these types of threats. Some of the things that I like to think about is, what do we need to do? So there's sort of easy things that companies and individuals can do, the basic hygiene that we talk about, right?
Hmm.
So for a business, vulnerability management, I know that is the most boring topic and we've been talking about it for 40 years, but it's still one of the key areas. Passwords, MFA, right? Security
Yep.
awareness training. Those are really important. So I think the more tech savvy cybersecurity folks can look at something like PKE or PKI, public key, encryption
Hmm.
or infrastructure, for an actionable defense, right? And I think what they gain from that is authentication means and non-refutability, right? So how can you trust that the message hasn't been tampered with? That's non-refutability. And how can we be certain you are who you say you are? And I think for the individual, healthy skepticism does some of that for them. Like what you were saying about having a secure word to make sure you know who you're talking to.
Yeah, it's
Do you agree with
I
that?
totally agree. And I think if we trust back towards why certain encryption algorithms and key infrastructure has been designed, that's proven technology. That's really good. Well, maybe we don't want to go into quantum AI, but it will scare some of the folks. But no, no,
Yeah.
totally. Public key infrastructure, even with the email threat hijacking, you could think about a mechanism that could help with that. That you say like, hey, there's a sequence number and the CNC doesn't add up because there's something weird and it's not signed with the proper key. Then yeah, I cannot trust this communication thread in that way. But yeah, I think it's a common. We're gonna see a combination of common sense and things that are very simple with very fine-tuned and finesse solutions.
Totally agree. Totally agree. Let's get to our second one, second and third, because we're going to throw a third one in there. We only probably have another few minutes, but let's talk about ransomware. I mean, it's been around forever. It sort of wanes or ebbs and then it comes
Yep,
back.
yep.
It's definitely back. But you bring up in your blog some really interesting things that help us see that the attacker is getting even more targeted with very sensitive data. Can you chat about that a little bit?
Yes. So one of the predictions we did from one of our researchers, because I'm not going to take credit for everything. It was a real team effort, which I think is really cool because we within our advanced research center we set out these questions like who wants to contribute, and we had an overwhelming response. So we have way more predictions than we could actually publish. But this one was very interesting because it's almost like a skip level what we describe. So we're already used to having criminals originally ransomware, so they want to install the software, encrypt your data, and then extort you with it. Then it was like, well, we also stole some data, and we're going to threaten to leak this data if you want, and you will still have to pay. And there was the denial of service that was a bit of extra, but it was still targeted at the organization. And what is interesting now is like data theft is predominantly aimed at the confidentiality of the information that was taken. But if you are, for instance, a medical or a medical institution or an insurance agent, or you handle very sensitive data for your customers, then you can say, as you're impacted by ransomware, you can say, well, our policy is not to pay. But if the attackers, through their means, can reach out to the actual victims who are the owners of the data, who are actually going to be impacted by it, they might have a completely different say to this. So that's what we're seeing slightly already with an insurance company. But we wouldn't be surprised, and that's our prediction, is that threat actors are going to leverage this more as an additional pressure. Because it's one thing if the company says like, hey, we're not going to pay, but if all their customers are pressuring a company as well, yeah, you get pressure from both sides, from the threat actor and from your customers. So that's it's going to be an interesting development, that for sure.
It is. And so just to make sure I understand it, what you're saying is that the threat actor, the adversary, they've got access to this data, this very sensitive, in some cases, confidential data. And then what they're doing is threatening to leak that customer information or PHI data. And sometimes I think they even do leak a little bit to scare the customer of the company that is hacked or ransomed. Is that right?
Yeah, and
so there's
correct.
No pressure.
And we this is already ongoing with like a snippet of the data. It's mostly directed at the victim itself. But what we will see is that they will, because if they have access to the complete data set of all the customers of, let's say, a dentist, that's not really something to be scared about, right? That's easy. And they would approach every single client of this dentist office and say like, hey, your dentist is not paying up, but you can pay this and then have your own data scrubbed. Or you can go to the dentist and pressure them into paying up because we're going to leak your data as well. And that's interesting because they're the custodians of that data, but you're actually the one impacted. So you strongly feel that you have a say about what is happening with your data and whatnot. So that's it's an interesting situation that the victims will be in.
Well, and I think with privacy laws, more and more, the owner of that data can go to the custodian of that data and say, I want it removed, right? And if it's ransomed, that brings a very interesting conundrum to the custodian of that data, the company that is attacked. So things that they can do to hopefully protect themselves, right, from ransom. Hardening endpoints, offline backups are critical. What else? What else do you suggest?
Well, one of the things the offline backups that's one. When it comes to sensitive data, we would also advise to encrypt it at rest. Look at a DLP solution. And actually, this is something I was discussing with one of our researchers earlier this week because he lives in a county in the U.S. I'm not going to name which county, but they were impacted by ransomware, and it was actually a government entity, and I think there were biometric information was also stolen. And I was like, that is really scary because you can change your passwords, you can change your credit cards, you can even change your address by moving somewhere else, but you cannot change your biometrics. So once that genie is out of the bottle, it's like a slippery slope. And to me, that's like, okay, we need to make some changes because we're at the same time that we're talking about AI, we're making advances in storing biometrical data, DNA data. Everybody has 1, 2, 3, the DNA test to determine where they're from. But how is this stored? Where does this go? Because once you give it away, it's out of your hands. And it's very important that these organizations, these often like companies for profit, will store it in the right way, will encrypt it in the right way, and that the data in rest is encrypted. that it's useless to the threat actor that might steal it, or if it got leaked, even if it's not deliberate. So that to me is, as a consumer, I'm very concerned about that. I'd like to have my sensitive data encrypted and rest, and that the organization that is taking care of my data takes the proper precautions, like have good cybersecurity, good endpoints, have proper detection, data loss protection ruling. If they are HIPAA compliant or HIPAA, that they have to adhere to HIPAA, that they take all the precautions. Similar with credit card data, that they take all the necessary requirements to protect your credit card data. So that's the least we can expect as consumers or as businesses dealing with other businesses.
That's right. And then the offline, completely off the network, having your backup completely off the network is going to help as well. And encrypted for the highly sensitive data. Absolutely. 100% agree. This has been super fun. I'm really glad we got to chat today. And I think it's a really important blog for folks to read through. So there's a link at the bottom of this LinkedIn Live. Super grateful that you came on to chat with me today. And enjoy the holidays, everyone, and be safe out there. Take good care.
Take care. Thank you, Christina. It's been a pleasure.
A pleasure, John.